He thought he'd left danger behind. But the moment former Navy SEAL Jack Turner slipped beneath the gray Oregon waves, fate dragged him into a nightmare no training could prepare him for. A single cut on his glove sent blood swirling into the deep, summoning a pack of great whites that drove him for miles through an underwater canyon. When the current finally released him, it hurled him into a hidden cavern sealed away from the world. A place where a colonial shipwreck lay beside modern stolen vaults, and a long-lost treasure hunter, now half feral, watched him from the shadows. Above ground, his loyal German Shepherd Ranger sensed every heartbeat of danger. While officials dismissed Jack as lost, Ranger and marine biologist Hannah Brooks followed fractured airflow across the cliffs until they found the truth. What followed was a race against collapsing stone, a frantic rescue, and a discovery powerful enough to reopen decades-old crimes and rewrite Jack's purpose forever. If you're ready for a story of survival, loyalty, and a treasure hidden beneath America's wildest coast, you're in the right place. Before we begin, tap follow to support the channel and comment where you're listening from. Or simply write Amen for everyone who needs a second chance in life. The Oregon coastline had a way of swallowing noise. Waves crashed against the black rocks with a steady rhythm. But beyond that, nothing. No car horns, no radios, no crowds. It was the kind of place a man went when he wanted to disappear. And that was exactly why Jack Turner chose it. Jack was 38, tall and hard-built from years of military conditioning, with shoulders broad enough to give him a permanent silhouette of strength. His face carried the proof of deserts, jungles, and wars no one talked about openly. A faint scar cut across his left cheek, the kind that never fully blends in no matter how many summers pass. His hair was dark, shaved short on the sides out of habit, and he wore a trimmed beard sprinkled with early gray, an unintentional reminder of what he'd seen before he was ready to see it. After leaving the Navy SEALs, Jack tried living in cities again, tried blending back into civilian life, but the noise rattled him. Crowds sparked the tension he thought he had buried. So he had come here, to the quiet town of Port Lorne, a fishing village tucked into Oregon's colder edge. To the locals, he was the quiet vet with the dog, the man who kept to himself but worked hard and paid cash on time. Jack spent most of his days running a private dive tour charter, taking wealthy thrill seekers out to see century-old shipwrecks lying off the coast. He had refurbished an old 40-foot boat, the Meridian, painted a faded blue but strong as steel, and it had become his floating home more than his cabin ever was. His closest companion, the one creature he trusted without hesitation, was Ranger, a 5-year-old German Shepherd with a thick sable coat, amber eyes sharp enough to cut, and the posture of a soldier bred for discipline. Ranger had served with him in a K-9 tactical unit during his final overseas deployment. The dog moved with confidence, tail high, ears alert, but his gaze softened when he looked at Jack. Locals adored Ranger. Kids at the dock knew him by name. Fishermen often scratched his neck as they loaded nets. Ranger, in return, watched over Jack the way a shadow protects the body that casts it. Life, while lonely, had become almost predictable until the day Dr. Hannah Brooks stepped onto the Meridian. Hannah was 34, slender but athletic in the way people become when their careers demand long days outdoors. She had warm brown skin, freckles across her nose, and wild dark blonde hair she constantly tied into a knot, only for the wind to undo it. Behind her glasses were sharp hazel eyes, the kind that missed nothing. She worked for NOAA, studying the migratory patterns of great white sharks along the Pacific coast. She spoke fast when she was excited, laughed easily, and asked questions Jack didn't always want to answer. But she treated Ranger kindly, and that alone earned her a measure of trust. Noah had rented Jack's boat for a week-long tagging expedition. Their task? Deploy satellite transmitters onto a group of large whites that had begun appearing unusually close to the coast. Hannah had suspected climate shift patterns, but she wasn't yet certain. What she did know, however, was that something about the shark's behavior was changing. The first day she boarded, Ranger approached her carefully, tail stiff but not aggressive. Hannah knelt down, letting the dog sniff her hand. "He's beautiful," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Smartest partner I ever had." She glanced up at him. "You were military?" Jack answered with a simple, "Used to be," and left it there. Hannah didn't push, though Jack could tell she wanted to. She was the type who carried curiosity like an instinct, not a choice. During their week together, Hannah tried several times to make conversation. Sometimes Jack humored her with short answers. Sometimes he let silence speak instead. But on the last day, as the sun bled orange across the sea, she said something that stayed with him long after she left. "You know, Jack, you don't have to stay alone just because you've been through hell. Some people come back from the worst things and still find a reason to live better." He didn't respond. Couldn't. He simply stared at the horizon until her reflection faded from the water. A few days after Noah's departure, a wealthy businessman named Cliff McAllister arrived at Jack's dock. Cliff was in his mid-50s, tall and broad-bellied, with an expensive mustard-colored jacket and a trimmed salt and pepper beard that looked more like fashion than aging. His smile was practiced, the kind executives wear in boardrooms. Cliff introduced himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to buying anything he wanted, including people's silence. "I hear you're the one to hire if I want to see places the tourists don't," he said, glancing toward the open ocean. Jack studied him, instinctive caution rising. "Depends on where you want to go." Cliff tapped a folded map. "A place called Blue Chasm. Locals say it's dangerous, but I'm willing to pay whatever it takes." Jack stiffened. Blue Chasm was a deep-water canyon few dared approach. Strong currents, unstable rock shelves, and according to Hannah, an unusually high concentration of great whites during this season. "You don't want to dive there," Jack said bluntly. "It's not a sightseeing spot." Cliff grinned. "Everything has a price, Mr. Turner. What's yours?" Jack nearly refused, but his cabin roof leaked after last winter's storms. His outboard engines needed new seals. Repairs meant money he didn't have. And maybe, he told himself, facing the ocean's dangers was easier than facing the nightmares he could never outswim. Eventually, he gave a slow nod. "All right, tomorrow at dawn." That evening, as Jack sat on the edge of the boat with Ranger pressed against his knee, Hannah called. Her voice carried urgency. "Jack, listen." Sensors picked up increased shark activity in the Blue Chasm area. "They're schooling, big ones. Please don't take anyone there, not this week. It's too risky." Jack thanked her for the warning, but didn't reveal the contract he had just accepted. He knew she would argue, maybe even alert the Coast Guard. And right or wrong, he needed the money. The call ended with Hannah's soft words lingering in his ear. "You've survived enough. Don't go turning your luck into a death sentence." Jack told himself her concern was unnecessary. He had survived war zones more unpredictable than the Pacific. He had Ranger watching his back. He had done dives 10 times harder. But as the last light faded and a cold wind swept across the dock, a memory flickered. Sand, gunfire, the scream of metal, Ranger dragging him out of a collapsing compound. A reminder, survival doesn't always repeat itself. Still, he made his decision. What Jack didn't know, what no one on land could have known, was that the journey toward Blue Chasm would not merely threaten his life. It would take him places no map had ever captured, force him into darkness deeper than the ocean itself, and lead him toward a discovery buried by time, greed, and fate. The sea was waiting, and it never waited kindly. Dawn arrived muted and gray, the kind of Oregon morning where the horizon seemed stitched directly into the clouds. Jack Turner stood on the deck of the Meridian, tightening the straps of his dive gear, the heavy neoprene suit hugging him like a second skin. Ranger paced beside him, nails clicking anxiously against the deck. The German shepherd's fur bristled slightly, his amber eyes fixed on the water, as if he sensed something brewing beneath the waves. Cliff McAllister, wrapped in an expensive thermal jacket far too bright for a place like this, was busy adjusting his sleek private diving helmet, custom-made titanium edges, matte black visor, clearly owned by a man who preferred paying for safety rather than understanding danger. Cliff wasn't diving yet. He lounged near the cabin door, radiating boredom rather than fear. "You sure this place is as impressive as people say?" he muttered. Jack didn't bother correcting him. "Stay on deck until I signal." His voice was stern, clipped, pure SEAL command tone. Cliff raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, Captain." Jack snapped his gear into place and knelt beside Ranger. The dog pressed his forehead against Jack's shoulder, a behavior Ranger displayed only before high-stress missions. Jack rubbed behind his ear. "I'll be back, buddy. Watch the boat." Ranger huffed through his nose, unhappy but obedient. Hannah Brooks arrived moments later, having rushed across the pier after analyzing another sonar spike before dawn. She hadn't slept, and it showed in the faint shadows under her hazel eyes. Today she wore Noah's dark blue waterproof jacket over a gray sweater, hair pulled back into a messy knot. She approached Jack and lowered her voice. "The readings doubled overnight. Something is drawing the whites close to the canyon. Jack, if anything feels wrong, abort. Please." Jack nodded, but whether in acknowledgement or dismissal was unclear. He slid his mask down, locked the clasp, and prepared to descend. With a practiced motion, Jack slipped into the water, barely disturbing the surface. It was colder than usual, shockingly so, enough to bite through the wetsuit. The ocean swallowed him whole. His oxygen bubbles lifted toward the dim light above as he angled downward, engaging the underwater scooter, its propeller emitting a low, steady hum. The descent revealed a world tinted blue-green and swirled with drifting sediment. As Jack neared the canyon's entrance, the ocean floor dropped away suddenly into a steep undersea valley. Large rock plates layered one over another like the ribs of a prehistoric beast. Jack followed the wall, scanning for safe pathways and stable ledges for Cliff's later dive. That was when it happened. The sharp sting slicing across his glove as he brushed against a jagged coral outcrop. He hissed reflexively. A thin line of blood spiraled upward like a red ribbon dissolving into the water. Jack froze. He had handled injuries underwater before, but here, in a region Hannah warned was experiencing abnormal shark activity, the smallest drop mattered. He checked the wound, shallow, manageable, but the water had already carried the scent. At first, the ocean simply grew quieter. Then the light dimmed. From the haze of the deep, a massive shadow materialized. A white shark, longer than Jack was tall, emerged with that unmistakable, smooth, predatory glide. Its eyes were black coins reflecting nothing but hunger. Jack's pulse spiked, not panic, but training, cold, clinical awareness. He tightened his grip on the scooter and angled away. The shark followed. Then another shape appeared behind it. Then another. 3. No. 4. A whole hunting party. On the boat, Hannah monitored the sonar feed Jack had strapped to his tank. The signal, normally calm and slow, suddenly accelerated. A clear vector on her screen indicated rapid movement. She leaned forward. Jack? Jack, do you copy? No answer. Cliff wandered over, chewing gum loudly. What's he doing? Racing fish? Hannah ignored him, eyes narrowing at the screen. The velocity was too high for voluntary movement, too erratic. Ranger barked sharply behind her, pacing tight circles on deck, tail stiff. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Below, Jack darted through an undersea ravine as the sharks synchronized behind him. They weren't attacking yet. They were herding him, driving him deeper into their territory. He pushed the scooter to its limit, weaving between stone pillars, ducking beneath overhangs, narrowly avoiding collisions that could break his mask or rupture his tank. Each time he risked a glance backward, he saw pale bodies slicing through the water with terrifying grace. One shark surged closer and brushed past his fin, knocking him sideways. Jack regained control instantly, but the message was clear. They could end this whenever they wanted. The canyon funneled into a narrower chute. Jack had two choices: climb upward into open water where the sharks had advantage, or follow the chute deeper where geological instability was a real threat. He chose the chute. Better to risk rock than teeth. Hannah watched the sonar line stretch far past the safe zone boundaries. Her heart tightened. He's going too far. That's not a survey dive anymore. Cliff scoffed. He's a professional. Let him do his job. Hannah spun toward him, frustration sharp in her expression. You don't understand. This isn't normal behavior. The sharks are moving in coordinated patterns, and your diver is right in the middle of it. Before Cliff could retort, the sonar signal jerked and elongated. Jack's speed had doubled. Then, just as suddenly, the signal flickered, distorted, warped, and vanished. Hannah's breath caught. No! No, 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 Jack! Ranger launched into frantic barking, claws scraping the deck as he bounded to the rail, sniffing aggressively at the wind, then toward the sea as if pinpointing something Hannah couldn't see. Cliff, suddenly pale, whispered, "What does that mean? Lost transmission?" Hannah swallowed hard. It means he's either out of range or something happened to the device. Deep below, Jack's tank scraped a rock ledge as he shot through the narrowing chute. He felt more than heard the vibration of something large hitting the canyon wall behind him. A shark attempting to follow, but not fitting through. The others circled back above, furious shadows in the water. Jack didn't slow. The chute's end appeared ahead, a dark seam in the cliff face, barely wide enough for a man in gear. He angled his body and plunged into it, leaving the predators crashing against stone outside. Inside, darkness swallowed him. The chute twisted and angled downward, the current dragging him violently. His scooter clipped a rock, jolting from his grip. The impact spun him, knocking the regulator against his jaw. But he managed to regain the mouthpiece and stabilize his breathing. Then he saw it. A faint glow far ahead. like the ghost of daylight shimmering through underwater mist. He kicked hard, letting the current pull him toward the unknown. Behind him, the muffled roars of frustrated sharks reverberated through the stone. Ahead, the narrow passage widened, and the glow grew brighter. Jack felt the temperature rising slightly, a sign he was entering an oxygen pocket, maybe even a partially dry cavern. His lungs tightened, not from fear, but from the staggering possibility that this chasm hid something no charts had ever recorded. The current seized him one final time and flung him forward into emptiness. Jack tumbled through an opening and broke the surface of an underground pool, gasping into a cavern lit by a natural skylight. He ripped off his mask, chest heaving, mind reeling. Water dripped from stalactites above. Somewhere deeper inside, something shifted. A hollow echo that didn't belong to rock or water. Something or someone was in here with him, and Jack Turner had nowhere left to run. Jack hung in the icy water for several breaths before muscle memory forced him to act. He raised his head, wiping droplets from his eyes as his lungs dragged in the heavy, mineral-scented air of the cavern. The only illumination came from a narrow slit far above, sunlight filtering down through stone like a blade of pale gold. Its glow stretched across a massive underground lake, scattering into shifting reflections on jagged walls. The cavern was enormous, cathedral-sized, its roof spiked with stalactites like the teeth of a god waiting to swallow intruders whole. He turned on his dive light. The narrow beam cut through the shadows, revealing fragments of wood drifting beside him. Jack swam toward a stone ledge, muscles aching as he hauled himself out of the water. His boots sloshed heavily, and his wetsuit dripped onto the cold ground while he steadied his breath. The beam of his light slid across the cavern floor and froze him in place. Half-rotted wooden ribs from an ancient ship curled outward like fingers reaching for salvation. The hull, or what remained of it, lay split in two as if crushed under the weight of centuries. Barnacle-covered beams sprawled across the stone, their faded carvings half devoured by time. Scattered between the splintered planks were chests, some shattered open, others sealed with metal bands rusted to the color of dried blood. Jack crouched beside one, brushing away grime. Beneath the rust, his light caught a glimpse of engraved steel, Latin inscriptions he couldn't fully read, but recognized as something old, something that didn't belong under Oregon's cliffs. The open chests spilled their secrets freely, dull gleaming coins stamped with a worn cross, the kind minted in the Spanish colonial era. Some were fused together by oxidation, others rolled when his boot accidentally nudged them. "This is impossible," he murmured. "A colonial merchant vessel this far north? No recorded route matched this, unless the ship had been blown drastically off course, or had been running from something." He stood and scanned farther down the cavern. That was when his light struck metal that did not belong to any century but the modern one. Square steel vaults, thick-walled and bolted, were stacked against the stone, many toppled from their original positions. Logos barely legible under decades of corrosion marked them. Hawthorne National Financial Group, a private U.S. banking conglomerate that had collapsed under scandal in the 1970s. He remembered vague headlines about missing bearer bonds, off-book assets, and vanished safety deposit vaults. Now several of those vaults sat before him, coated in mineral dust, some pried open. Inside were stacks of disintegrating papers, metal lockboxes, and a few bars of gold half-wrapped in plastic film. Jack felt the weight of the moment settle into his bones. What he had found was not just history, it was evidence. evidence someone once cared enough about to hide in a prone place reachable only by risking death. As he rose, a faint scrape echoed from somewhere deeper in the cavern, sharp, intentional, not the random settling of stone. Jack stiffened. He wasn't alone. His training snapped into place. He dimmed the light and pressed his back against a pillar of rock, listening. The silence returned, but something in that silence felt wrong. Too aware, too deliberate. He scanned low, then high, sweeping for movement. Nothing. Just the drip of mineral water from the ceiling. He moved cautiously toward the inner tunnels branching off the main cavern. The water pooled in irregular shapes here, the stone slick and uneven. One tunnel was choked with collapsed rock, another narrowed into darkness. The third showed signs of something stranger, drag marks in the dust, wide and messy, as though heavy objects had been pulled through recently enough that the markings hadn't completely been smoothed by moisture. Jack tightened the strap on his remaining equipment. Whoever or whatever had been here could be armed, desperate, or far worse, panicked enough to guard this secret with violence. He surveyed the cavern again, noting vantage points, exits, possible traps. His SEAL instincts told him the place wasn't just a natural hideaway. Someone had used it strategically. He forced himself to breathe slow and quiet. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal, modern scents in an ancient tomb. Then his light landed on something unexpected. A canvas duffel bag slumped near a rock shelf. He approached, weapon ready though he had none but a diver's knife. The bag was mildewed, but the zipper was functional. Inside lay 3 items: a rusted canteen, a mold-mottled sweater, and a waterproof notebook sealed in plastic. Jack opened the notebook. On the inside cover was a smeared name, Samuel Pritchard. He froze. That name, he had heard it. A treasure hunter who vanished in 1982 searching for lost coastal mineral wealth. Newspapers had dismissed him as a fraud, a conspiracy chaser. His disappearance was categorized as an accident. Yet here his notebook sat. In a cavern reachable only through the shark-ruled underworld, Jack himself barely survived. Jack flipped a few pages. The handwriting grew frantic deeper in the notebook. The cavern is older than the ship, older than anything. The ceiling breathes at night. Someone else has been using the vaults. Not safe. If I can't escape, maybe the tides will bury it again. A sudden thunk echoed behind him. Jack's blood chilled. He spun, raising the flashlight. A silhouette darted between 2 stone pillars. Not an animal. Too tall. Human. "Hey!" Jack's voice reverberated through the cavern. "I'm not here to steal anything, but I need to know if you're injured. I can help." Silence. Then a faint rustle, like someone receding deeper. He edged forward, careful to keep the shipwreck and vaults to his back. The cavern seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Every step tightened the knot in his stomach. The light flickered over jagged stone, leaving pockets of darkness large enough to conceal a person. Another sound, this time from above. Jack whipped his light upward. For a fraction of a second, he saw something perched on a narrow ridge. A thin man with tangled hair and a wild beard streaked white, wearing shredded clothing that clung to him like seaweed. His eyes caught the light, reflective, desperate, half feral. Then the man vanished into the shadowed upper ledges with the agility of someone who had lived in the dark for far too long. Jack's throat tightened. If that was Samuel Pritchard, then he had survived here for decades. Or he had become something else entirely. Jack stepped back onto the stone shelf, heart hammering. The man, or whatever he now was, had disappeared completely. The cavern's darkness swallowed all traces. The echo of movement faded into a silence so thick it pressed against Jack's ears. He knew two things with brutal clarity. He wasn't alone, and whoever lived in this cavern did not want him here. Above him, a brittle stone crackled. Pebbles rained down. Jack flinched, raising his light. And then something moved directly behind him. The chapter ends here. Jack steadied his breath as he pressed his palms against the cavern wall, feeling for the faint tremors of moving air. His dive suit clung coldly to his skin, heavy with minerals and moisture. The cavern around him seemed to breathe in slow pulses, whispering drafts sliding down through cracks overhead. He raised his flashlight, sweeping it across the stone ceiling pocked with fractures, each one potential salvation or disaster. He needed a route out, and he needed one fast. He checked his oxygen gauge. Barely a third remained, enough to submerge again if required, but not enough to fight the current for long. The underwater passage that had spit him out here was impossible to swim back through. The pressure and one-way flow would crush him. His only chance lay above. He turned his attention to the notebook he had stuffed into a waterproof pouch. The writings of Samuel Pritchard. The words were frantic, fragmented, but one line stood out. The ceiling breathes. Follow the breath. Jack wasn't sure if Pritchard had written it in delirium or revelation, but either way, the instinct felt right. He followed the faint currents rising through the fractures, mapping a mental trail toward a potential exit. Meanwhile, miles above the cavern floor, but only yards above Jack in vertical distance, Ranger sprinted along the jagged coastline, nails scraping rock. The German shepherd's coat, thick sable fur with lighter streaks around the shoulders, bristled with alert tension. His ears snapped forward, body rigid each time the faintest trace of subterranean air rose from the cliffs. Ranger wasn't panicking. He was tracking. This was the same determination he'd shown on combat missions. Nose low, gait strong, muscles coiled like springs. Hannah Brooks followed closely, panting, carrying a portable gas sensor unit she had fetched from Noah's mobile lab van. Sweat collected on her brow despite the cold coastal wind. Her hazel eyes were sharp, scanning every crevice Ranger stopped at. She wore a weather-worn beige hiking jacket and jeans, her hair tied back and frizzing under the mist. There was no hesitation in her movements, just unwavering focus. They climbed upward along the cliffside. The terrain grew uneven, sharp basalt ridges rising like broken knives. From behind them, a voice shouted, echoing across the stone. "Brooks, what the hell are you doing?" It was Chief Petty Officer Frank Delaney of the local Coast Guard station. At 45, Delaney was a barrel-chested man with gray-streaked hair, cropped close, and a neatly trimmed beard that gave him a commanding presence. His uniform jacket strained across broad shoulders. Deep lines cut across his brow, etched by years of risking his life in storm rescues. Delaney was respected, but also notoriously by the book, the kind of man shaped by tragedy. He once lost 2 crewmen in a capsized vessel during a winter storm, and since then, he avoided all operations based on intuition or hunches. Everything had to be proven, measurable, guaranteed. Hannah didn't slow down as she answered, breathless but firm. "Chief, Jack's alive. Ranger knows it. The sonar data showed vertical movement toward a cavern system. We have airflow pockets along this cliff. Look!" She thrust the gas sensor device toward him. The screen flickered with fluctuations. Not enough for certainty, but enough for possibility. Delaney frowned. His tone softened a fraction as he eyed Ranger, who growled low, staring intensely at a hairline crack in the stone. Hannah, I can't deploy a recovery team based on a dog's instincts. He's not just a dog, Hannah retorted, stepping closer. He's a former Navy K-9. He's trained to find survivors. Delaney crossed his arms. Even so, but Ranger barked sharply, cutting him off. Once, twice, then again, tail stiff, body angled toward a spot halfway up the cliff. Hannah knelt, holding the sensor against the rock. A spike appeared. Airflow, stronger than before. Her voice trembled with urgency. Chief, someone is down there, and they're moving. Delaney hesitated. The battle inside him was visible. Protocol versus instinct. Caution versus conscience. Finally, he muttered, Fine. I'll radio for a lightweight drill rig. But this is on you, Brooks. Back underground, Jack used the butt of a rusted crowbar he'd found near the vaults. He tapped against the ceiling at intervals, listening to the echoes. Several spots were solid, dead zones. But one area, a slab no thicker than a few feet, produced a hollow resonance. His heart kicked. He struck it again, harder. Above, Ranger's ears perked. He spun in circles, barking furiously, claws kicking small rocks off the ledge. Hannah gasped. That was impact. Did you hear that? Delaney lifted his head. The faint tremor reached him seconds later. His skepticism evaporated. We're drilling here, he ordered. Jack struck again, sending vibrations up the stone. The hollow echoed back with promising clarity. He lit 2 emergency flares, their smoke curling upward, searching the micro cracks. The stone drank the warmth, then expelled faint wisps of vapor, proof the air was circulating vertically. Jack stepped back to conserve energy. His arm stung from exertion. He knelt and secured several coins and documents from the vaults into a waterproof pouch. Not for wealth, for proof. If he made it out alive, the world needed to know what had been buried here. Then the sound came again, the same presence he had felt in the previous chapter. A soft scraping from deep within the cavern's side tunnels. Jack raised the flare. The orange light cast an eerie glow across the damp walls. He wasn't alone. A shadow skittered across the upper ledges, a thin figure moving unnaturally fast, limbs sharp against the rock. It was Samuel Pritchard, or what remained of him. The man's eyes gleamed with a strange intensity, the kind formed by years of isolation and fear. His thin frame and tangled beard clung to the bone, but his movements were calculated. He watched Jack, not with hostility, but with a mixture of territorial warning and primal caution. Easy, Jack whispered, although he knew the man might not understand language anymore. Pritchard stopped. Tilting his head, he stared at Jack's flares, fascinated by the heat and smoke. Then he backed away, dissolving into darkness like a wraith. Jack exhaled slowly. He couldn't deal with Pritchard now. Survival came first. He raised the crowbar again and slammed it into the weak slab. Above, the seismic sensor Hannah held spiked dramatically. Dust tumbled down from the cliff. Ranger barked so loudly, the sound bounced off the rocks. Delaney's eyes widened. That was internal collapse pressure. We need to drill now. The rescue crew, recently arrived with portable drills, rushed to position their equipment. Delaney grabbed the controls himself, bracing the drill against the rock. Hannah stood beside him, clutching Ranger's collar as the dog strained toward the source of the vibrations. Below, Jack slammed his crowbar one final time. The slab groaned, cracked. A thunderous echo rippled through the cavern. Then, a faint, unmistakable sound reached him. Drilling. Jack's heart surged. Just as hope rose in his chest, a shrill cry echoed from the depths of the cavern behind him. Samuel Pritchard's voice, raw and panicked. Jack spun around, flare trembling in his hand, just in time to see a shadow lunging from the darkness straight toward him. Jack barely had time to raise his flare before the feral silhouette of Samuel Pritchard hurled itself toward him. Pritchard's movements were jerky, desperate, more instinct than intention. His wiry frame, wrapped in scraps of mold-eaten fabric, collided with Jack, sending the flare skittering across the cavern floor. Jack's training took over. He seized Pritchard's forearm, careful not to injure the gaunt man more than necessary, and pivoted, redirecting the momentum. Pritchard stumbled to his knees, gasping, his tangled beard hanging in wet clumps. His eyes, though wild, weren't malicious. They flickered with terror, like a man who had spent decades expecting every shadow to kill him. Jack crouched, speaking low. "Easy. I'm not your enemy." Pritchard flinched at the sound of the voice, crawling backward, fingers clawing at the stone. In the dim glow of the fallen flare, he looked like a phantom stitched together by fear. Jack stepped back, palms raised. Something about the man, his hollow cheeks, his trembling shoulders, told Jack he'd lived too long alone, chased not by sharks or criminals, but by memory. Before Jack could speak again, the ceiling above them rumbled. A rain of dust fell. Another drill burst of vibration cracked through the cavern. Pritchard covered his ears, rocking. Jack realized the poor man wasn't attacking. He was terrified of the noise. He retrieved the flare, positioning it so the warm glow spread gently. "Someone's coming to help," Jack said firmly, unsure whether Pritchard understood. "No one is here to hurt you." Above, the rescue team had begun widening the drill site. Chief Petty Officer Frank Delaney, covered in rock dust, barked instructions at 2 Coast Guard officers, Petty Officer Luis Ortez and Specialist Mariah Dunn. Ortez, in his early 30s, was a lean, sharp-jawed man with olive skin and restless, darting eyes. Once a competitive free diver until an accident pushed him into rescue service. Dunn, taller and sturdier, with dark braided hair and calm brown eyes, had a reputation for keeping her head when everyone else panicked. Both worked fluidly under Delaney's direction, securing anchors in the stone. Hannah hovered beside them, face streaked with dirt, clutching Ranger's harness. The German shepherd strained forward, muscles taut, growling low every time the drill bit hit a stubborn section. Hannah whispered to him, steadying him. Ranger wasn't afraid. He was urging them onward. The moment Ortez broke through a final layer of stone, a warm gust of subterranean air rushed upward. Ranger barked wildly, tail stiff, ears forward. Hannah's breath caught. "Jack!" Inside the cavern, the sound of drilling intensified. Jack shielded Pritchard with his shoulders as small fragments of stone rained down. The older man whimpered, curling inward. Jack tightened his grip. "Hold on, we're getting out." A chunk of ceiling dislodged. Light, real, natural, daylight, burst through the crack like a salvation flare. A rope dropped, its carabiner clinking against the rock. Jack helped Pritchard stand. The man trembled violently, as though the very idea of escape threatened to shatter what remained of his mind. "It's okay," Jack murmured. "You're going home." A shout echoed from above. "Turner, secure yourself to the line!" Jack guided Pritchard toward the rope, but the man balked. His eyes darted to the darkness behind them. the tunnels he had called home for decades. He whispered, voice hoarse and thin, "Not safe out there. Not safe." Then he shoved the pouch containing his notebook into Jack's chest, as if it were a burden he had carried too long. Before Jack could stop him, Pritchard staggered back into the shadows. One heartbeat later, the cavern swallowed him whole. Jack reached out instinctively, but hesitated. The man had chosen the darkness he knew over the world he feared. Jack felt the weight of that choice, but he respected it. Survival sometimes meant retreat. He clipped himself to the rope. "Pull!" Above, the rescue team braced themselves. Delaney gave the order. Ortez and Dunn hauled the line with deliberate strength, muscles bunching under their jackets. Jack ascended steadily, dragged upward through the rough opening. Hannah leaned dangerously close to the edge, gripping Ranger's harness. The moment Jack's head emerged, Ranger lunged toward him, whining in relief. Hannah grabbed Jack's arm. Her face broke into a breathless smile. "You're alive." Jack coughed, half laughing. "Thanks for not listening when they told you I was dead." They pulled him fully onto the cliff, laying him on solid ground. His wetsuit was shredded, his hands bleeding, but his eyes were sharp. He held the waterproof pouch tightly. "There's more down there," he said hoarsely. "A lot more. Old ship, modern vaults, evidence of financial crimes buried half a century ago." Delaney raised an eyebrow. "Vaults?" Jack unzipped the pouch, revealing the rusted coins, documents, and the notebook with Pritchard's fading script. Dunn whistled softly. Ortez muttered, "This is something." Hannah examined the coins, brushing mud from their surfaces. "Jack, this could rewrite coastal history." Delaney nodded grimly. "And reopen a case the feds shelved before I was born." Within hours, federal authorities arrived. Rangers from the National Park Service, forensic analysts, maritime archaeologists, and FBI agents swarmed the site. One of them, Agent Caroline Mercer, introduced herself. She was in her 40s, tall and angular, with sharp cheekbones and a controlled posture that commanded attention. Her dark hair was tied into a low, neat ponytail, and she wore a charcoal suit under a tactical windbreaker. She questioned Jack with a mixture of professionalism and respect. Mercer had spent her career unraveling financial crimes and had a reputation for empathy toward whistleblowers and victims. "This find," Mercer said, examining the pouch's contents, "could close a chapter of theft and corruption that ruined countless families. You did the right thing bringing it forward." Jack shrugged lightly. "I just wanted out alive." But when Mercer informed him of a federal reward for significant evidence recovery, Jack felt something shift. Not triumph, purpose. Weeks passed. The shipwreck's treasure was transferred to museums. The vaults became evidence in a reopened investigation. News outlets hailed Jack as a reluctant hero. The Coast Guard honored Hannah for scientific contribution, and Delaney, though embarrassed to admit it, thanked her privately. With the reward money, Jack purchased an abandoned warehouse near the Oregon shoreline. Together with Hannah, he transformed it into a coastal search and rescue K-9 training center. Ranger, now an icon among the community, trotted proudly through the halls, mentoring younger German shepherds in tracking drills. His amber eyes gleamed with a sense of renewed purpose. One evening, months after the rescue, Jack stood atop the same cliff where he had been pulled from the earth. The sunset painted the Pacific in gold and deep blue. Hannah approached, hands in her jacket pockets. Ranger sat between them, tail sweeping contentedly. "Funny," Jack said quietly. How getting chased by sharks for miles gives you a second chance at life. Hannah smiled. Some treasures aren't gold. Jack nodded, eyes drifting across the ocean. Yeah, some of them bark. Beneath the waves, distant dorsal fins cut the surface. But this time, they weren't chasing. They were simply there, reminders of the world that had almost claimed him. Jack Turner breathed deep, his past finally loosened from its grip.